All right, all right, all right. Hello.
Hey,
All right, so this is a video about Sam Harris, um, and he's talking
and
about RFK, and I think he brings Trump into this, and maybe Joe Rogan and some other people. I'm not really sure where all this stuff gets into.
so for those of you that don't know, Sam Harris is kind of one of the intellectual elite. He used to be part of the intellectual dark web that was coined about the people that would say things that weren't quite PC, but they would talk logical. But Sam Harris has since kind of, he,
Very much
he's
strayed
had
from
some,
that.
yeah, he's strayed from that to where he's now towing the narrative lines, and he's big on
He's
COVID, big
lost it.
on,
He's lost it a
yeah,
lot. So when I first came upon him, he was one of the four horsemen
yeah.
during the religion versus atheist debates.
Mhm.
And it was there was like four. It was Daniel Dennett, Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, and Sam Harris. I think
Yeah.
were the
So
four.
Sam Harris is a very book smart and intellectual speaking type of fella, but as Jimmy Dore said when I was listening to another clip of him earlier today, Jimmy Dore says, "Yeah, he's the dumbest, smartest person I've ever heard in my life." Because he says things that sound so clever, but he's just wrong about everything about these
He's
little,
he's really. I mean, just when you listen to him now, you can hear him betraying his own like
yeah,
historical logics. He's basically sacrificing a lot of his own personal like a lot of his own personal beliefs, um, in some ways, for in favor of a new narrative. I mean, he said things recently about like he'll completely change the conversation. I think there was one, and it might even be in here where he talks about, if the I think it was actually on a different podcast that also happened really recently, where he talked about how he basically said if COVID was more like an airborne Ebola virus and you didn't know that you had it for like a month, and it largely affected children, and it had 100% death rate, like none of these things, like having to get vaccinated, would not even be a conversation. It's not even like everybody would just have to be forced to get the vaccination.
yeah. And the phraseology of how he put it almost imply that he wishes that it was just worse enough to make people had to have complied.
That is how it kind
That's
of
kind of
comes
how he
off.
phrased it. Yeah.
That, like, it's like, hey, in how it sounds like to him is like, in my dream world, this is what the situation would have been, so that you guys didn't have an opportunity to complain about not getting the
Yeah.
vaccine. And so it was. I mean, this isn't even his first controversy, but in this kind of a realm of him just kind of being like, I don't care how bad things are, um, regardless of how bad you think it is. This is what I think is the worst thing, and the worst thing in the world is Trump, and the
Yeah.
number one concern that we should have is Trump, and because Trump is worse than COVID, it's
Yeah,
worse
that was his
than
last video. That
I'm
yeah.
it, and it was
Yeah.
just kind of like, dude, you are exiting the realm of rationality here. You're
Yeah, that's the one
fine
where
with anything as
that's the
long as
one where
you
he
get your
admitted the
outcome.
conspiracy. He admitted the conspiracy of media to um to cover up things in order to get Trump out of the office, or to him not to him to lose public support for the election. And he's like, you know what? To a degree, I believe it was, and I'm glad it happened. Or he said something
It
along the
was
lines of
it was
he was
it
like,
was a little
yes,
different than that. It was, I don't know that he was necessarily admitting it, but he was more kind of saying like, even if it was, that is preferable because, so
yeah.
it's it's effectively the same thing, though he's not like, oh yeah, the media was told, but I think even in that he more or
No,
less
I
did.
heard him. This might have been a longer ago interview, but he did more or less say that about the media. Said, like, you know
Yeah,
what? Yeah, it was a conspiracy, and I think it was a proper one. He
right,
basically said
yeah,
that straight out.
yeah. So I mean,
He said, I
I
think it
feel like
should have existed.
I feel like there was a little bit more vagueness and a little bit more of an
Yeah.
opportunity to kind of tiptoe. Like it's debatable whether
Yeah,
he
but
was saying it or not, but the impression was very solidly
yeah,
like, I don't care if there was or wasn't, and I hope that there was, because the outcome ended up being that Trump is no longer president, was effectively it. And I think that even with all of that, it's like, dude, you're exiting a lot of this stuff. This is there's some wonkiness in your logic and rationale, and it seems like your TDS syndrome has just really blown up. It's kind of overtaken your mind.
yeah,
But let's start getting into this.
yeah.
Let's check it out.
He's on the Chris Williamson podcast. He's just
Yeah,
another podcaster that's kind of been popular lately.
yeah.
Um,
All right,
yeah,
let's go.
Why do you
Like,
think he's so hot at the moment? What is it about RFK?
full
well, it's exactly that. He is speaking very directly to this contrarian echo chamber. Contrarian / conspiracy thinking, conspiracy addled echo chamber, where the non-standard version of everything is almost certainly the right account, right? So no one can be trusted. All you really can. It is a kind of it's a kind of religion of suspicion that is being born. It's like it's a pseudo awakening of they're all fucking liars.
Interesting to me that it's basically people have skepticism about the things that their government are being told. Now, I remember when I was growing up, and my parents, during their time, they had this general opinion, and my grandparents had this general opinion of, look, we shouldn't be just blanket trusting the government. We shouldn't just be blanket trusting the pharmaceutical companies. If there are people who have money at stake, people generally understood. Maybe take things with a grain of salt. Maybe double check. Maybe do your own research. Maybe try to find out something. Try to find other ways to be convinced about these kind of things, but just don't just take their word for it. And it sounds like he's kind of twisting that kind of. He's basically taking that kind of mentality of skepticism. Now he's calling it a religion, and he's saying, and you guys are now, and then because of that, now that religion, it's a conspiracy theory. So
yeah,
he's completely flipped on his entire modus operatum of like questioning, because that's exactly what he did with religion. Is he just questioned and questioned and questioned and poked holes and found these things.
yeah.
And so now all of a sudden he's like on the other end of it.
So I used to hear him say a lot of really smart things that I didn't agree with, but like they're hard to disagree with. Like he used to say some really smart things with religion and atheism and things
There was
that were
validity to it.
there was
Some
some
level
there
of
was
validity
there's
to it.
yeah some level of making sense. Maybe he valued certain facts more than I do, but it's I used to respect his intellect, and now I just seriously all I see is his tilt. He's just like I think he is. I don't think he's intellectually honest anymore. I think it's all about the ends justify the means in his own mind. I think he's justifying his positions based upon because I know best. And
Yeah.
these guys are just crazy. These guys just be crazy, and we know what's best, and they're not trusting us, and they should be trusting us because we're the smart people.
It sounds like he's coming to his own conclusion, and then he's forcing the world around him into his conclusion. Is what it kind of seems like now. But let's continue.
Click that
Right?
square,
Like
make it bigger.
that's what happened to so many millions of people during COVID. They're all liars. I mean, you just got Gavin Newsom closing the
I can't really make it bigger, otherwise it changes all the aspect ratio and everything.
Got it. Okay.
beaches, and then he's over at French Laundry, perfectly coiffed at a fundraiser. It's that hypocrisy that people found. I mean, that was just a 20 megaton moment of hypocrisy that detonated and broke trust with half the country, and so it's, again, that's all understandable, but we have to be realistic about just what is true and likely to be true in each moment, and is everything the CDC says likely to be wrong, right? Like, is that really where, is that what we want to default to? You can't trust the CDC about anything? Is that how you really?
So I think that what he's like, this is just kind of like a level of a misrepresentation. It's not that it's that everything that the CDC says is wrong. It's that, hey, here's a new claim about something that we don't really know much about, and they seem to be coming at it from a very authoritarian, we do know kind of a perspective, and then we're like, okay, well, what's going on with this? What's going on with this?
I'm going to go further.
Yeah.
The CDC only says what they want us to hear, and the truth doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's the truth or not. Sometimes it might be, and sometimes it isn't. We just can't trust what they tell us, not because everything is wrong, but because they have a political motive, and they have a motive with how they want to portray things. So it's not that everything is wrong, but I guess you can say the cry wolf situation too. I mean, in reverse, I guess.
Well, so it's almost like you can build up your credibility by stating the things that are true, and you can build consistency through with that. And then when you say something that you want people to believe, then they will take it on face value, and they will say this is that, and they will just accept it as being true. But there are people out there who are going to say, there's something off about this, like.
But they lost that credibility now, and they're saying like, okay, just forget that, just give it. We're owed it. Give it back.
We went through so many
give
things.
Give us back the credibility.
Through COVID and just trying to understand COVID, we went through so many things where they just completely backtracked, and it went. I mean, it went for. There was like, oh, it affects kids drastically. Oh, it doesn't affect kids almost at all. And I don't know if this was like the CDC necessarily saying this, but it was the overarching narrative of the general medical field that were going back and forth. Oh, it can the vaccine. I don't know that the CDC is necessarily saying this, because I don't think that the CDC is necessarily the linchpin. They're not the linchpin in it.
But it was a collaborative effort, and it's like, hey, this is what the narrative has to be, because we need to make sure there's compliance. Same reason why they said about the masks not doing anything, and then they do things. They switched that because they needed people to act a certain way,
and they
had
needed
nothing to do with revealing the truth. It was just making the public do what you want.
Right. They needed it so that if one arm was saying something, the other arm needed to confirm it, and then all of the fingers of both of those arms, those needed to confirm it as well, so that the story and the narrative could be cohesive, and they could basically back each other, and then they can have a nice firm grip, so that when things try to say, hey, there's something off about this, they can say, no, look at how tight we all are. You can't break us apart, because we're all kind of saying the same thing, and we have the authority to these things. So yeah, okay, let's continue.
They want to be a consumer of medicine. It just is completely unworkable. What we need is a CDC we can trust, and insofar as we don't truly have that, then that is where we have to perform surgery. But
so that's where the problem kind of effectively came, is that like before COVID, I think that for the most part the country did trust the CDC. And they trust the FDA. There's a lot of things that the people trusted, but what this process went through under COVID, it kind of exposed this level of doubt, because we saw them make these factual claims, and then it would turn out to be something different. And even when we learned that it was something different, they wouldn't even oftentimes correct it until much, much, much later.
And so all that trust that we had in them before, it's not only that they just started to lie now, it's more that the trust that we had before was probably unwarranted.
Well, it so probably was inconsequential. I would say it was probably inconsequential. It didn't affect people's lives. Whatever they were saying, we could all just go about our lives normally.
I trusted that they were doing things and making steps. I trusted that they had different biolabs and things that try to solve problems and try to solve issues. But now I look at it as probably more nefarious than helpful. Um, so like
Yeah,
I'm saying they've effectively screwed their whole reputation and
yeah,
not just their reputation on this one issue.
yeah. I agree.
It's not like we can tear it all down and then we're just going to chat GPT our way to health. It's not going to happen.
How far do you think RFK gets in this political race?
Well, if I'm hopeful that if he keeps expounding upon how COVID was targeted to avoid Ashkenazi Jews and Chinese people, and I mean it's like if you give him a mic enough.
Another misrepresentation.
Yeah, that's a misread. Right. He never said that it was made to target them. Yeah. He was recognizing certain things, certain characteristics that oh look, these people were less affected, and he just pointed it out from
and he said
study.
There's maybe questions there. He quoted
a study that said that.
Yeah.
And he wasn't saying it himself. He was saying there was a study that says this, which there is.
Well, and he said that it's. I think what he did say that is maybe leans more towards Sam's point is like, it's because of that, it's maybe worth a look. There's an argument out there. I think is the words that he uses. Is that there's an argument out there that this was weaponized, that this may have been weaponized, to target. Because it has a significantly less of an effect on these biological markers that are more racially specific.
I'm so glad you got that word right. Biological markers. I always just say things. Like I always forget about the right terminology. That was the right terminology.
Yeah. Okay, let's go.
He will put his foot. He'll put both feet in his mouth and in your mouth and in any mouth that's available. I mean, but again, it's not that he's wrong.
Interesting is that was almost kind of like one of the things that Trump ended up using was the level of he would basically inflame to some degree. Oftentimes, in my opinion, the left had just and the Democrats inflamed themselves. And it drove them crazy, and so then when they would go out and they would say these things, they would just be virtue signaling like crazy, and they would say all these crazy positions. It made more normal, rational people kind of step back and be like, "Whoa, hold on a second, you're really kind of going crazy here," and so that ended up bringing people over to Trump's side, and so it's interesting that he's kind of like using that methodology of hope that he keeps on doing this, even though that's the exact thing that he hates Trump over, because it's such a divisive thing. So he hated that he did it, that Trump did it, but he's more or less in favor of.
Ironically, if he were to get the nomination because Biden just couldn't run anymore for obvious reasons, RFK would garner more bipartisan support for having those COVID views than lose votes from the Democratic Party that would not vote for, like, they wouldn't vote for a Republican, right? They'd vote for RFK, and there'd be some people in the middle that would vote for RFK because they'd be swayed by.
He's not as divisive. RFK is not as divisive. So
I think he would do better than a Biden, honestly, with the Democrats.
Oh, absolutely.
Even though they don't, because the Democrats they hate him, they don't care if they vote for him. They're not going to put an R of any name. Yep. They could be anything. They could be
they'd be Gandhi. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it could be any Republican. Like, nope, no way.
Yeah, same thing. Republicans do the same thing. But anyways, let's move on.
Wrong about everything. It's harder than that, right? He is right about many things, and the fact that people love what he's saying is totally understandable. It's just not half truths are harder to deal with, and or statements which are riddled with truths, but the general shape of them is wrong and aiming in the wrong direction. Like that is just, it's hard for people to parse that stuff. And it's especially hard when occasionally the conspiracy theory turns out to be true, or very likely to be true. It's like if you're a person who has an appetite for every conspiracy theory, right? So JFK wasn't, couldn't have been a single shooter, and you've just bought every one since then. Then you're going to be, then when COVID likely escaped a lab in Wuhan, if you're the first person to sign up to that in an environment where everyone's being called racist for signing up to that, you're going to look like this contrarian genius who just they couldn't fool me, right? I knew that it likely came out of a lab.
He has an interesting and valid point there. I think is
Sure.
when you have somebody who dives into conspiracy theories and they finally get something right.
Interestingly enough,
it almost verifies all of the other ones that happened beforehand.
Interestingly enough, the idea of things that are riddled with truth and it's hard to fight back. He does the exact same thing. He says things that are very reasonable at times, and so like if you go to a place where they have a cheap product but everything else is really expensive, but they have one cheap product that you know the price of, but you don't really know how other things should be priced, you just trust that everything else is,
that the expensive stuff is
also
actually better,
right.
and it is.
So
It's almost like a wine.
He says stuff that is so true and grounded, and of course, and I see why people agree with that. He has all these things that draw people into saying, "Oh, he's a reasonable person." So therefore, it tries to, it infers that all of his things are reasonable that he says.
Yeah.
It's not like he's trying to do that, but it's just that's kind of the reality of everybody that really believes things. They say things, and maybe the equations don't quite work out to what the real truth is, but they have a lot of facts that they can line up.
Well, it's reputation, right? I mean, Sam in a sense is doing the exact same thing. Is like he's got this reputation of making sense. I mean, he has a podcast, he has a book called Making Sense, and he has a long history of being logical and rational and reasonable. And so when he speaks, it's not that he's just kind of speaking like without any of that context necessarily there. That there's a long history of evidence that shows that he's correct. And so when he gets to points where he's wrong, it can be that much more difficult for him to acknowledge that he's wrong on something, because his reputation has not only informed his viewership and his audience that he's correct, but he himself may even fall into the aspect of, well, of course I'm right. This is, look at my history. I've got the credentials for it. I've got the history for it. So, okay.
Whereas the rational position to have had, I mean, you have to take all of these things a la carte, right? Like you just have to honestly investigate, within the confines of opportunity costs and bandwidth. You have to investigate them as they come. And I mean, with that one in particular, it was always obvious that it was at the very least plausible that COVID could have escaped a lab. We just know we have a problem with lab leaks, and there was the Wuhan Institute for Virology right there working on coronaviruses.
It's interesting because if he were to have said that before, when everybody was when a lot of people were saying like, hey, this may have come from a lab, it was literally looked at like, you're crazy.
It was looked at as racist.
Yeah, it was looked at as racist. It was
like you're trying to blame China.
Crazy.
You're trying to blame the Chinese people for this.
Yeah, so he can sit here and he can say this now, but that was not. I seriously doubt that was the reality of what was going on in his head. That was even remotely a consideration that he had, even at that time. I have my doubts about that, because during COVID he seemed to have completely bought into a large aspect of the narrative. Okay.
It was never race. That was a woke shibboleth bullshit to call that racist, to worry that it come out of a lab.
Should have spoken to Rob Reed. That would have made it easier.
Which Rob Reed is that?
That did After On. Didn't he do a big?
Oh, right, yeah. I was thinking about the Christian Rob Reed. Yeah. So Rob and I did a podcast on this kind of topic, lab leaks in general, and synthetic bio in general. But again, that you can't give. So if someone like RFK Jr. likes all the conspiracies, like every one of them, he likes the cell phones cause glioblastoma idea, which again, it's totally possible, right? It's like it's not that it's not worth looking into, but if you like that one, and you like the Bill Gates microchipping one, and you like the Wuhan one, and you like that COVID itself was just a pandemic, and
so now it's like he's taking
Yeah.
what he even would say is a rational thing to have questions about and to want to look into, and he's just kind of attaching onto RFK these things that he has no position on, that he is not.
I think that he is making good sense there. There are people that are more conspiratorial minded that the credibility of each conspiracy is almost, the more conspiracies you agree in at a time, it almost kind of lowers the credibility of the person that believing them a little bit. I mean, it's fine to believe in certain things, like you said. Some things have some sort of truth in it. They could be true, but the more you believe, the more you kind of like, is that just your psyche? Is that just like some people are just attracted to that? There's conspiracy theory shows. There are people that love that stuff because the whole world is out to get everybody, and so.
Oh yeah.
So that's why what he's saying right now does make sense, and it actually is and I'm gonna agree with Sam Harris in saying that actually is the problem with RFK. It's not that he's not reasonable; it's that he believes in so many things that it just makes it seem like he's a conspiracy theorist in general. To me,
okay,
you might disagree. I mean, I think he's a good heart and he's in the right place. I think that he believes it. I just think that not everything is a conspiracy. Maybe it is.
I mean, I
don't think so.
Personally, like I've listened to RFK a pretty fair amount since he started running. I don't know of him speaking too much about necessarily conspiracies. I know that he has kind of asked questions about things and kind of inquired about, hey, you know what? It's really strange that, when you have some of these places where people are always having. I mean, I don't know if this is the cell phone waves or whatever that's kind of happening. People who've had their phone next to their head, their skull is thinner in that area,
Right.
and like that's like an actual thing that happens. And so it's like, maybe it's a conspiracy. Maybe you could say that it's a conspiracy that these cell phone waves are thinning people's skulls, but it's at least worth something looking into.
Ultimately, there are more cell phone waves going, whether you have your cell phone to your head or not. They're every which way in the air right now on your head.
Sure.
No matter, so it's like.
But there's a difference between it being everywhere and it being diluted, because it's kind of like everywhere, and then the source, more of the source of it coming out of a specific device, so that it's hitting you. Like if it's, it'd be like almost the difference between finger slaps and a punch, right? Like if somebody's going like this to you, 20 times, you're gonna be okay. But if somebody's punching you,
in order for you to have coverage, you have to be saturated at every angle.
Yes, with fingers though. It would be with fingers, not fists. When you've got a cell phone up to your head and it's got the stuff is coming.
So you're saying
all
of
the vectors
are leading from the phone to wherever?
Yeah, and it's
not
going
targeted. It's not
It doesn't. It
targeted.
doesn't have to be targeted. It could just be. It could be in a sphere. Well, I mean, this isn't like an area of expertise that I'm
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that I'm knowledgeable about. But I would, from just common sense kind of understanding, if I have a device and this device receives and transmits these Wi-Fi or um,
Yeah,
these
cell
signals,
yeah.
these cell signals, right? Then the closer you are to that device, the harder the more dense those waves are going to be. And so if you had it out here or you had it on your speakerphone or something like that, it's gonna spread out because that's what its whole purpose is to spread out everywhere. But if you have
You see a
something
signal
blocking
when you.
it,
I'm gonna tell you this the opposite way. If you see the signal strength on your phone, that changes. What is it detecting? It's detecting what you're talking about.
yeah,
So the stronger signal strength that you have in your phone represents the amount of bombardment of the cell signals
right.
that you're
Which
close
is
to.
why in the
And
middle
the
of your
source is.
house,
I'm telling you, the source isn't the phone. I'm telling you, the source is coming in at us. The phone doesn't matter where it's at. Where it's the source is wherever the signal's strong. The phone is in fact a
okay,
metal detector. We're saying, okay, this is the safest spot to stand, where there's no coverage, there's no bars. I can stand here. I'm safest from the signal. So that's what I'm saying. It's not actually the phone itself.
the phone's not projecting out
Oh, it
any
is.
signals.
It,
It's not projecting out wave signals.
it reaches out some, yeah, in the handshake form, but the majority of it is from the cell towers and stuff.
Right.
So
Right. Okay.
so anyway, whatever.
I don't know how much I know what I'm talking about. I'm just kind of theory crafting, I guess. It's my conspiracy mind coming out.
So we don't have to. I mean, if we want to listen more to this, I guess there's 3 minutes left. We can watch it if we want to.
Let's try to we'll try to blow through it.
And you like all of these, and you like the Ashkenazi Jews don't get COVID. You just have, it's a characterological problem. You have this appetite for, I mean, you see this, the true avatar of this way of thinking is someone like Alex Jones, right? Like, and again, I don't know if Alex Jones is just a performance artist and it's cynical and not real, or if he really believes what he says he believes. But assuming he believes what he says he believes, he is just, it's like you're a nymphomaniac and what you love is lies, right? And half truths, right? You just love the least credible ideas. Whatever can come over the transom, that's what gets you hard, right? And so that you're just going to keep doing that.
So just as a quick note about Alex Jones, an interesting thing about Alex Jones and why I think that he plays an important role is I think that it's important that you have somebody out there who is a voice, at least, who takes all of these crazy claims seriously, even can believe them, and to try to connect dots or whatever you want to do, as damaging as that can be to certain areas of society. I understand.
He just joined up with Steven Crowder and Mug Club, by the way.
I'm not surprised. But one of the things that I think is really important about what he does do is that he talks about things, and he has connected dots about things that have come true that we otherwise would have no idea about.
Yeah.
And so that's where I think that, okay, the way that I kind of look at it is like, okay, you can listen to him, be entertained. This is how I process Alex Jones is I can listen to him, I can be entertained by the things that he says, but I'm not going to take the things that he says seriously. But then when something comes out and it's like, oh hey, this is what's going on, because there are people out there who are trying to verify this stuff, and then it comes out that it's true. It's like, interesting that Alex Jones, this crazy guy, got something right. And so it almost makes you do a double take and think, how crazy is he really?
He's had way too many things come true that he says that you think
that
are
it's
crazy.
Scary. Yeah.
There's a lot of things that are. I mean, because he does come off as a complete loon when I watch him, like he's ADD or something. But
yeah,
I have I appreciate Alex Jones. I don't ever listen to his show, but I always enjoy him as a guest. On almost any show that I see that he's a guest, I'm like, I want to watch that.
Yeah, he's a fun listen, and I think
Yeah.
that that's the way that people should learn to listen to him, is that think of him as an entertainer.
And it's a disorder, right? But it's, if it's true that certain frogs are getting turned gay, right? And you're the first one talking about that. Well, he was right about those frogs, so he must be right about everything. You're going to find an audience, and what's so perverse about our current environment online is that there is no real evolutionary pressure anymore, because everything can succeed. There's just there's always, you can always just find another corner of the internet and another echo chamber, and just this part of 4chan, and if 4chan isn't good enough for you, it can be over at 8chan, right? It's like you can find this little hellhole where you're going to find a requisite number of people to monetize ultimately are willing to hear and talk about anything.
But Sam Harris doesn't want to necessarily.
Well, and he didn't want to allow for that kind of nonsense.
Right, he doesn't want to allow for it, but he also wants to. He can sit here and he can spout his nonsense, as if his narrative and his concept is accurate, even though it is just as conspiratorial. And he has a more accurate, or at least like rational, history. So I mean, I feel like there's a level of hypocrisy kind of going on with Sam Harris in kind of taking this information and using it to his own benefit, using his own audience, kind of a thing.
When I'm watching it, I'm actually getting sad watching this, because I see the smart Sam Harris. He's still there, and he says things, and it's just like a throwback to like the Sam Harris I knew and I know, but like he's just compromised. He
doesn't apply it he doesn't apply it broadly like he used to. Like he used to apply it to everything, and now there's certain areas that he's very selective about.
So I, unlike many of the people we just spoke about, I'm convinced that we have an enormous problem with misinformation that is held in tension with our desire for free speech on every topic, 24 hours a day, that we have to take seriously. We have to take, and it's not that we should ever write a law which says people have to go to jail for saying crazy things. I think the First Amendment truly is sacred, and the right, it's just beyond sacred, it's just the right algorithm to have for it to run a democracy, and we have it in America, and almost no one else has it. But that's not the same thing as having a right to the gamification algorithm that boosts the craziest stuff preferentially to the ends of the earth and maintains it forever, right? And now you add generative AI to that, and I think the problem just gets worse. So yeah,
he's talking about it backwards, though, because there isn't an algorithm that favors conservative shows that are speaking this nonsense he's talking about. That's vice versa. If you watch, like Steven Crowder says all the time, he says, you know what? If you watch my show on YouTube, at the end, the recommended videos won't be a Steven Crowder show. It will be a Jimmy Kimmel. It will be a whatever else. They push you into more left-leaning content on purpose. So what he's talking about is like, okay, I mean,
he has his wish already.
Right. It's actually opposite of what he's saying, where he's saying that like, oh, you can't just have the situation where this nonsense conservative stuff is pushed into being stronger and stronger and stronger and taking over the world. That's not what's happening. It's actually being diminished. It's actually being hidden and shadow banned, and it's not what he's saying it is.
Which is exactly why he's like, and he even says so himself. He's like, well, that's why these people get pushed into 4chan, and if 4chan doesn't work, then they go to 8chan.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. So he encounters. Yes, you're right. He even contradicts himself with that previous.
Yeah.
I didn't think about that. Good job.
I'm worried about consequential lies and half-truths in a way that many of my colleagues in Podcastistan aren't.
We'll get back to talking to Sam in 1 minute, but first I need to...
Okay.
Yeah, that's I think that's
That was good.
yeah.
Okay. I think we can call it there. Drop a like, hit the subscribe button if you enjoyed this content. Make sure you hit that notification icon so that you can get notified on the next one. All right. Take it easy, guys.
Better.